So next up, we have Pete Moorhouse, who is the Managing Director of Basin Energy with the ticker code BSN. Basin is a green energy metals exploration and development company with an interest in three highly prospective projects positioned in the southeast corner and margins of the world-renowned Athabasca Basin in Canada. And it's recently entered into agreement to acquire a significant portfolio of green energy metals exploration assets located in Scandinavia. So to tell you more, I'm going to hand you over to Pete.
Excellent, thank you, Jane, and thanks, Guy, for the exceptional preamble there. It's an exciting time to be in the space, and I think everyone on this call will be very excited, I'm sure. I'm here to talk to you about a bit of a gear shift here. So we've had Boss talking about production. I'm going to take you through some exploration insights, what Basin Energy has been doing, and my thoughts on exploration jurisdiction. Okay, so we should have a screen share going. Disclaimer, this release will be available for viewing on the ASX on our website as of tomorrow, so please feel free to read that at your leisure. Now, Basin, we are, I would argue, from a microcap explorer's point of view, one of the most uranium skill-setted board and management around. My background, I'm a geologist, and as a lot of you will have heard me talk before about uranium exploration, but really that's been our forte. The technical drive comes from Odile, so Odile's ex-Orano, significant time looking for uranium in northern Africa and also northern Canada. And then Blake and Corey with extensive experience in the US. Blake and Matt themselves involved with Azago, who was sold to Encore Energy back in 2022 for some 200 million, as Duncan is discussing some of the Encore experiences just a minute ago. Now, with that, it gives you a bit of a strong set of criteria for strategy. So when I talk about exploration, we're talking about why Basin is exploring where it is. And it's really, there's some fundamental points which I think everyone needs to be aware of. One is jurisdiction. Jurisdiction keeps popping up here. But operating in areas where there is an active mining industry, preferably where uranium has been mined and explored, and there's a policy in place, there's a clear framework for both exploration but also through to development. Having a clear exploration strategy, so understanding what the model you're aiming is, but also ensuring that you have a model which is explorable for your scale. So whilst there are some phenomenal deposits to be had in the Athabasca at 1,000 meters depth, it is very, very difficult for a small cap explorer, especially in the markets we've seen over the last few years, which is why we're pretty excited about our holding both in the eastern Athabasca, which we'll talk about in a minute, but also our shift into Scandinavia. Project maturity, so ensuring that you have enough data to get going and a way of adding value to your projects relatively quickly, but also that you've got space. So going and doing the same thing that all the previous explorers have done and expecting a different outcome is fundamentally wrong. So ensuring that you have a different strategy and enough room for a credible discovery, and using that knowledge and that criteria to unlock other opportunities. So not being afraid of looking where potentially others have not been looking in recent years. Now, Basin itself, as I mentioned, we are a very small company. We are an explorer, and we currently have 3 assets in the Athabasca Basin, which is what the company was IPO'd on about 3 years ago. And we also have a portfolio of exploration licenses in Sweden and some reservation ground in Finland as well. So all Northern Hemisphere at the moment, and we believe in some pretty exciting jurisdictions and some strong explorability. Now, I'm not going to do my full Athabasca talk. A lot of you will have heard it, but I just want to outline where we are sitting there and why we're so excited about what we have done and why we think this holds an intrinsic value moving forward. So we have 3 projects in the Athabasca, North Mallee and Marshall, and now we are exploring for what we call traditional unconformity deposits here. Now, these are a bit deeper targets, and we have done the least amount of work on. And then we have the Geeky project, which we're targeting what we call basement host mineralization. Now, this is really leveraging that geological framework we were just discussing, having a shallower opportunity, potentially an opportunity which was really overlooked since the discovery of the NextGen's Arrow deposit back in 2013-ish, so 12, 13 years ago. Now, the Athabasca Basin, northern Canada, is home to some of the biggest, most highest grade uranium deposits around the world. Now, with this, you have that jurisdiction, you have that understanding of uranium market operations, and an acceptance with both government and with local socials. This is home to the likes of Cameco, the likes of Orano, and we believe that this holding that we have in this area is phenomenal. I'm going to talk to you about Geeky primarily. So this is the work that the Basin's been doing. Now, as I mentioned, we're targeting what we call basement host mineralization, which has been overlooked significantly until we took over the project. So historically, a little bit of baseline work, enough work to prove rock type, enough proof to prove structure. We did a series of geophysics and we did 2 drill programs on it. And it's left us in a position where we've tagged what we believe is a significant system, and we have no shortage of targets to continue and follow up on there. Now, quick geology, these are 2 different comparisons for drill cores. So the green box is drilling at Geeky, and the box to the left is drilling from other major basement host mineralization systems in the world, or in the Athabasca, I should say. Now, these systems have a very specific set of alteration patterns, and what you see at the top here is alteration from the Arrow deposit. We've got alteration from the GMZ by Arthur Energy, formerly 92E, which some of you will be aware of, the Rough Rider deposit. And then we have what we've been tagging at Geeky. So you're in one of these systems. These alteration patterns are dead ringers, and you've got the scale as well. You've got tens of meters of these pervasive clay alterations. But we drilled this last year and we didn't hit any raging grade. We got evidence for metal. We got up to just over 0.25% uranium. So we know that there's uranium in the system, and we know that we have an active system at play here. Now, that leaves us with what next there? Well, the best vector we've found for tagging this and mapping this has been using gravity. We've got a series of gravity anomalies sitting. We've only just started to test them. There's no shortage of targets to put this rig out. We're in an area of emerging recent exploration success, for example, baseload energy, and I mentioned Arthur Energy a moment ago. These gravity features appear to be representing these alteration patterns, and we know that we can be just a few meters away and be missing that grade. So no shortage of targets to drill test. Again, from a project maturity, there's plenty of space here. There's some really solid fundamental data, and you're in the right jurisdiction on the edge of what is the world's premier uranium district. And an active policy to be pushing SMRs forward as well. Now, there is, recently was permitted a uranium processing circuit in Finland, and that started to commence production back in 2024. However, Sweden does have an active ban for uranium mining in place at the moment. Now, that was placed in 2018. It was under review from 2022, and an inquiry recommended lifting that ban towards the back end of last year. And we're expecting some news on that over the coming weeks and months. So pretty positive from reopening an industry for uranium extraction in Sweden. Why did we go into Sweden? Well, we looked at what we were identifying in this basement host mineralization in the Athabasca, and we're looking for opportunities elsewhere in the world. And we saw these historic uranium districts in northern Sweden specifically. Now, these are part of polymetallic districts. So we've got some of the majors operating in exploration right next door to us. We know that there's some VMS opportunities just to the south. So it's a true polymetallic district, but historically was explored as a uranium area as well. Hasn't really been looked at since the 1980s. So we kind of looked at this and, well, geologically, what have we learned in the Athabasca over the last 20 years? What do we think from a prospectivity for multi-commodity green energy metals moving forward, and realize that there's a real opportunity here. We hold, just to mention that, there's a reasonably large area of holding, 200 kilometres squared of land, of areas, and really only 3 focused areas of drilling. And these drillings are really tight space. So Verka, for example, there's drilling in space of 300 by 300 metres, and they hit some mineralisation. The same at Raba and the same at Bjork. We picked this ground up. We've gone and done some initial mapping and done some initial sampling, picked up rock chip samples away from that historic drilling, both in situ and in float, running at several % grades of uranium. Also some really interesting rare earth results as well, with some strong heavy metal concentrations, heavy rare earth concentrations as well, and some fascinating zinc numbers. But critically, these occurrences that we've picked up are away from those historic drilling areas. Now, the drilling targeted where outcropping rocks existed. So what our logic here is, okay, with modern exploration, our recent understanding, with geophysics that we have available, what opportunities can we see sitting directly underneath these thin veneers of glacial covers around these prospect areas where you know you're in a fertile system with some really, really exciting grades. Now, the big advantage is there's also a lot of drill core in this area. drill core from drilling at Bjork, drill core from Rava, and drill core from Verka. And it's very well preserved. So from a junior's point of view, it's free data. The guys have been pulling this apart from a geological perspective and extrapolating, okay, well, how can we use this for targeting? And we've consolidated our land position around those drilled areas to take out what we think is the most prospective. And we'll continue to roll out that exploration strategy where you're all looking at shallow hosted, potentially reasonably good grade mineralization for commodities which are going to be absolutely essential to Europe over the coming years. So that's our position in Scandinavia. Very quick overview, but I am very conscious of the time. So perhaps we've crossed over to any questions there, Jane?
Yeah, absolutely. And of course, every time we do this event, we do tend to run over time because Guy does like to give us a bit of overview. Look, I'm going to jump into it now. So regarding the Athabasca project, you touched on results from Geikie, but didn't talk about Marshall and the North Millennium project. So just a bit of a brief overview on those.
Yeah, absolutely. So we've got, as I mentioned, there's 3 projects there up in northern Saskatchewan. Now, the Geikie project was targeting what we call the basement mineralization, whereas North Millennium and Marshall were deeper sets of targets. Start off with North Millennium, we ran some ground EM over there, and we're struggling to pull together a drill-ready target. So that's one that we're going to put in a little bit of a, let's think about this from a different perspective. There's no major conductors. However, 100% owned Marshall project next door, we ran ground EM on and found what we found a set of what we call stack conductors, where we get anomalism both above and below that unconformity we mentioned. Now, this is a pretty exciting target, but it is deep. So we're talking maybe 700 meters target depth there. So you're going to be drilling 800-meter holes, which is very difficult for a group like us. It's a very credible target. We've got a runway on that, but that's an opportunity that we're looking at releasing value from elsewhere with the company moving forward. So yeah. At the moment, the focus that we believe we can add most value to is on those shallow opportunities at Geikie and with the basement hosted stuff in Scandi.
Well, just on that then, so you've walked us through Basin's recent expansion into Scandinavia. Can you provide a little bit more detail on the strategic rationale behind this move and how these assets fit into the company's broader growth plans?
Yeah, absolutely. Look, from our perspective, you're always looking for those opportunities where you think you can add value and build from in the position that you're in. So we identified this using that skill set and that criteria that we outlined a moment ago, and going, well, the Athabasca is exceptionally tightly held for those credible targets, and it has been for a significant period now. We're very proud of that ground in the eastern side, but it is remote and it is hard exploration, so we're not shying away from that. But to expand that holding in the Athabasca for those sorts of targets is very difficult. So our narrative here was, okay, we can do this. We can be a relatively early mover into Scandi for a similar model and take out a reasonable amount of land for a relatively low cost. And be able to add value at a relatively low price point. So being able to do that groundwork, that mapping, that looking at old core, that resampling, and then being able to drive into these assets as well. I mean, there's forestry tracts across the vast majority of them to then be able to explore from a cost-effective point of view. It's opportunistic. We like it because it's something different, but we believe that there's a serious way forward to put some value onto that for us.
Yeah, absolutely. Look, and I think we've heard a lot today from, all the presenters that have been speaking, but the global demand for uranium is forecasted to rise over 200% by 2040. And nuclear is increasingly being viewed as the cornerstone of this energy transition. So how is Basin positioning itself to capitalize on this momentum, particularly as governments in regions like Scandinavia and North America re-engage with nuclear policy?
Yeah, absolutely. So establishing yourself with that key ground, as both Duncan and Guy alluded to there, that there is a series of projects that can start to ramp up when we see that price move, but then there's a big gap. As Guy said, there's been very little real exploration for 15 years around the planet now. So we see that Basin has an opportunity here to establish themselves for the ASX as a investment opportunity for this, risk capital, but exploration phase of this cycle, which, as you know, if you get right, is phenomenal. That strategic moves to pick up ground, which you can add value to and you can explore in jurisdictions which we believe will be or are supportive, is really the positioning there. And it's going to be an exciting few years ahead, and what a time to be in uranium. So.
Isn't it? Absolutely. And look, I think just finally, shareholders thinking about near-term milestones,
Mm.
what are next steps they should be looking at?
Yeah, okay. Obviously, there's the work that we're doing at the moment. So the guys are, it's not, the guys are in the sheds at the moment looking at that core, assaying that core, setting up the models for how to move that northern Scandinavian projects forward. We've got a series of samples in the lab there as well. We've managed to acquire quite an extensive historical set of geophysics as well. So using that and getting that into a modern standard and doing the relative QA/QC on it, that's going to direct our immediate moves in Scandinavia. Potential other ways of releasing value for our unconformity targets in Canada as well is one that we're pushing actively. So there's a lot going on, and we look forward to updating the market over the coming weeks and months as to what that's going to look like.
Absolutely. Pete, thank you so much for joining us today. Copies of today's recordings will be available online in the coming days. And if we have missed any questions, please feel free to reach out by the contact details on the bottom of the ASX releases. But Pete, thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks again, Jamie. Really appreciate it.